Welcome to Charts Today, and my name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday the 30th of March comes to you from London, and all eyes still on the Middle East situation. Crude oil closing at a new 3.5-year closing high on Friday and holding on to these gains, now nudging the high that we've seen intraday of 120. That's going to be the level to watch. And of course, we do these for our clients. So we put out our morning call every morning. We're analyzing energy markets. And so that's what we do for our institutional energy trading clients, and also soft commodities report. And that's really showing a lot of bullishness as well with everything that's going on in the market. So really, that's the key. And if we I look at trends running across the soft commodities space, and we're seeing a lot of trends turning to bullish. My support and resistance levels, my target levels, medium term and short term. So watching these screens all day long, and you can see oil seeds, for example, really pushing higher. Urea, which is fertilizer coming out of the Gulf, that's another product that's really affected. So we're seeing soft commodities all starting to look bullish, and it can be even things like rice. This has an impact for Japanese consumers, Asian consumers. This rice price turning a corner, and now in a new uptrend, and we're seeing that in all sorts of products like sugar. We're seeing that turning a corner as well, new uptrend. So commodities that have been falling in price are now rising in price. And that is going to be another effect on inflation. Not just the oil price, but the cost of food is going to be a big factor. We're seeing the dollar nudging new highs again there on the daily chart. Looking at the 60-minute, we are just waiting to see if we break and run higher. The dollar being a sort of move to liquidity. The Japanese yen, this is looking very worrying, remembering that 160 is the number of yen that the dollar buys. So this is dollar strength, the yen falling, so nudging to multi-week highs here, and that's a worry. Looking at Bitcoin, a lot of people telling me that Bitcoin's bottom, but I just look at the chart and go, well, this is the 60-minute. If I look at the daily chart, of course, the picture there is still pushing lower. So, from that perspective, it's hard to be bullish when you've got the medium-term chart bearish. The Nasdaq had a terrible day on Friday, closing at a 6-month low. No big surprises there. We've got a downside target. Many of you will know that I've been saying the Nasdaq topped in October. And if we look today, we're seeing the futures up about 0.5%. So, there's a classic example of 4 steps forward, 1 step back, so 0.5% versus 2% downside. So we're seeing these markets all rolling over. It's not great, really. And that's just the impact of what we're seeing with the inflationary risk. So, we're seeing, for example, the DAX in Germany breaking to new, again, now really getting on for 12-month lows. So we can discount this upside target now. That only comes back into play if we make a new high. And do watch my resources on the targets. There's lots of resources there. You can watch lots of videos on the targets and how they work. Of course, the LSEG masterclasses are all there free to watch. And then, of course, Charts Today. This video is free. And by the way, on Charts Today, when you go to Charts Today, do please click on the YouTube link occasionally and like and subscribe and comment. I'm always grateful for the comments that I'm seeing there. And if you're not already following me, follow me on LinkedIn. I do lots of posting on LinkedIn of charts. I've got over 33,000 followers there. And so that's another place to keep up with me as well. So coming back to what we're seeing in markets, it's just really not great. And we're seeing other areas of the market, like the Sensex in India, this is really just plummeting, really. And the effects for countries like India are just huge. If we look, for example, at Indian bond yields, the cost of borrowing in India is just rocketing, and that is really, really significant there. And if you then look at things like the Indian rupee, that against the dollar, we're just that's rocketing again. This is the dollar buying more rupee, so it is really becoming a very serious issue for a lot of major economies. And I mentioned the yen, that is now giving an upside target that's taking us to new highs as well. So the yen going, this is the bond yield for the yen, and so looking really scary. In Japan, in January, people were worrying about the yen and what it meant, and now we're seeing that. Looking quickly at gold, that has been really quite volatile with everything that's been going on. The Turkish government had to sell off a ton of gold and this has been the thing. It's been a rush to liquidity, people needing to liquidate gold in order to get cash. But we are now seeing an upside target there, so maybe we've turned a corner. We are crossing there as well. Looking at the tech majors, really bad news generally. So if we look at the daily charts, we see Apple here, Amazon. We're seeing lots of downside targets as well. So don't forget, and Nvidia, this one was really critical. Multiple downside targets, broken 170. Again, I commented on this many, many times. One of my big calls for 2026 was Nvidia had topped back in October. Two new downside targets, broken 170. That's on Bloomberg. This is gold on TradingView. So, more and more people are using these targets across the board. The choice is yours. And of course, in UpData, you can run them on lots of different data services. This is Tesla. Downside targets that were given on Tesla, they're almost met now, and we are in a downtrend. And if you went to the 60-minute chart, you got even more downside targets. So you just kind of remember the targets. It's nothing I'm saying here. It's just that they are generated from selling thrusts to the downside or buying thrusts to the upside. Now, looking at and we saw on Friday some really big numbers on the Dow. Only a handful of stocks up, like Chevron, but you can see a lot of stocks down and being marked down. So we're seeing a breadth of market deterioration. Looking at the FTSE, so the UK market, I've mentioned this before. What you want to be doing is looking at trends. So this is the long-term weekly, the medium-term daily, and the short-term 60-minute chart. And this is BP and Shell, bullish, bullish, bullish on all three time frames. No big surprise there. And that's what we're seeing when we look at those charts. And if we go to the daily chart, which is what we'd call a medium-term time frame, we can just literally go and look at this playing through. So if I look on BP, we can see you've got the upside target's been beaten. You have to go to the 60-minute chart if you want to see that. But look at that. There's only 3 stocks that are scoring 6. There's a handful of other stocks there's one at 5. There's 27 different combinations here. And you can see, something like BAE Systems, for example, that has just gone into a short-term downtrend, but really it's still a score of 4. That's pretty good. Now, if you go to the other, and again, this is not any form of recommendation, this is just what's happening in the charts. And if you go to the other end of the scale, there's 20 stocks that are -6. That's bearish, bearish, bearish on all 3 time frames. So you can take a stock like Whitbread, down nearly 4% today. Downside target given and met, and making new lows. You really just cannot ignore the targets. And you can go through and do these. EasyJet, feeling the pain on jet fuel. You can just go through Sage, bearish, bearish, bearish. Even though we've got a little upside target, the trends are all down. So this is something that you want to do. Check the trends. It's not just about today's prices. It's about what the trends are saying. Anyway, watch those targets and keep an eye on the trends. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting, hang in there. Bye for now.